The Mediterranean, warned the Italian Prime Minister today, is a sea, not a cemetery. Matteo Renzi stressed that the problem of thousands of Africans risking their lives to sail to Europe could only end if the civil war in Libya stopped. Of course, the instability of North Africa has exacerbated a bad problem, but so has a change in legislation. At the end of last year, the Italian Coast Guard made clear it did not want to shoulder the burden alone for all those shipwrecked boats of trafficked people. They insisted it be shared out across the wider EU. Some believed at the time that having no security of rescue would put off those fleeing their countries. But it hasn't worked, so was it the wrong decision? These migrants arriving in Italy are among the 10,000 thought to have come ashore in Europe in the last week. They are the lucky ones. Up to 400 died when a boat coming from Libya capsized a few days ago. They've come from across North Africa and the Middle East, braving storms in what's been labelled the most deadly stretch of water in the world. In 2015, there's been roughly a 30-fold increase in deaths from those attempting to cross the Mediterranean compared to the same period last year. 909 migrants have died just since January. Much of the blame for this dramatic spike in deaths has been placed on the EU's cancelling of Italy's naval search and rescue operation known as Mare Nostrum last October. The operation leaders claim to have saved 150,000 lives in just 1 year.
We believe that the operation is having the unintended consequence of placing more lives at risk, and why EU member states have unanimously agreed that the operation should be promptly phased out.
With the human cost ever increasing, many will wonder what steps the EU will take now to stop the Mediterranean Sea from becoming a graveyard. Well, joining us now, Brendan Cox, Director of Policy and Advocacy with Save the Children, and Douglas Murray from the Henry Jackson Society. Thanks both for coming in. The legislation, Douglas, was changed to dissuade immigrants from coming over. It hasn't worked, has it?
Well, no. I mean, it's very hard to dissuade people from leaving war zones, from leaving a continent, indeed two continents that are very severely distressed and going through interminable strife and warfare. And legislation passed in Europe cannot stop that. It's what you do about it and what your ambitions are to cope with that, which really are the only issues.
And what should happen now? Do we say we will carry on a search and rescue mission, however many boats come over?
I think, as we've just seen, it's extremely hard not to carry out search and rescue missions. The endless tide of human misery which is washing across the Mediterranean is something which people cannot allow to continue. But I mean, I think the crucial thing is that we are in a very difficult position, and the publics and the politicians are in a very difficult position. On the one hand, public sympathy is very clear. On the other hand, if you actually poll people in Europe, I mean, a recent poll in Britain said, I think as little as 4% of the British public want more migrants. Right. So that's the delicate balance that politicians have to weigh up.
Brendan, where would you take this now? I mean, we've heard stories of traffickers calling coastguards and saying the boats are only half full of fuel. Do we carry on sending out vehicles to rescue them?
So I think we have a relatively simple choice on this, which is, do we let thousands of people die this summer? We know that there are boats at sea, not seaworthy, overladen with families. Many of those boats will go down and thousands of people will die this summer. What happened, we knew that this was coming. What happened, as we heard in the report, was that the EU made the decision, EU leaders made the decision to mothball that operation, to reduce that operation, to take the lifeboats out from sea and put them into port. And as a result of that, we've seen a 50-fold increase in the number of people who have died in the first few months of this year compared to the first few months of last year. But isn't the danger that you are giving people this false hope, that you are leading people into their death by saying this is a possible voyage, this is OK, you will, you know, there is a good chance you'll get rescued? That's not the kind of message that's helpful to anyone who's trying to... I think that's an understandable argument, but it's not true. So if you look at
Not true in the short term, perhaps?
No, both short term and the long term. So it's wrong in three levels, we'd say. The first is morally wrong. So you are saying that your policy is based on thousands of people dying in the Mediterranean and that being a disincentive. The second thing is it's wrong-headed because it doesn't take into account why people are fleeing. People are fleeing desperately. They're coming across the Sahara They're spending time in Libya. These people are not risk averse. The idea that reducing the lifeboat patrols is going to stop people coming in is simply not true. And the third thing is it's not working. Just look at the data from the first few months of this year. The numbers are up, not down.
On the moral argument that Brendan's put out very clearly, do we have to say, you know, however little appetite there is for more immigration into this country, we have to keep doing this?
Well, I think these are different things. Saving people from being drowned at sea is a different thing from necessarily making them citizens.
So
what you do with them after that.
Right. So if you rescued them, you would then what? Put them straight on a boat back home?
No, I mean that's also extremely difficult, if not only for being so unappetizing. That the ideal in all conflict situations that we know of is that people should. It's better for people to remain nearer to the neighbourhood that they're fleeing than it is to go halfway around the world. One of the reasons for that is that it's far easier after a conflict is over or after a humanitarian crisis is over to reintegrate back into their country.
Would you agree with that, Brendan?
There are all sorts of reasons.
So
there is a necessity of working with allies in North Africa and elsewhere. But it is also, you know, this is a European problem. And I mean, the Italian government has made this clear in recent years. It is asking for help. This is a sincere call. There are all sorts of things that, you know, people feel squeamish about having more cooperation within Europe. But this really is one of them. It is not the case that the migrant issue can be only one for Spain, for Italy and for Greece, the so-called soft underbelly. It is a European-wide problem.
And let's be clear on this. So there is absolutely these medium-term drivers, the long-term changes that we need to put in place to deal with this problem as a whole. But there's also this short-term choice. You're finding it very difficult to get anybody to come out and defend this policy because this policy is indefensible. Tonight, there are children out at sea who are more likely to die as a result of EU policy. We have to change that. Whatever you think about migration policy, we should be able to agree that as an act of public policy, it is not acceptable that children are more likely to die in our seas as a result of the decisions that we're taking.
Thank you both very much indeed. Thanks for coming in. That's all from Newsnight tonight.